They classified Earth as a Class 15 Deathworld. No planet in recorded history had ever reached that level. Class 12 was the highest the Galactic Council had ever confirmed, and even those were mostly uninhabitable wastelands where life barely clung to existence. But Earth wasn't barely surviving, it was thriving. The first probes sent to observe the planet transmitted back disturbing data. The gravity was extreme. The atmosphere fluctuated wildly. The weather alone was a planetary hazard: violent storms, scorching heat, freezing cold, tornadoes that tore apart entire cities, and hurricanes that drowned continents. Volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, tsunamis, every element of the world seemed designed for destruction. And yet, somehow, Earth's dominant species had not only survived but mastered it. They called themselves humans. Carbon-based, warm-blooded, highly adaptive. A species that should have been prey in such an environment, but had become the deadliest thing on the planet. Unlike most sentient beings, they had no claws, no fangs, no natural armor. Their bodies were weak, fragile compared to other apex predators. But they compensated for that in ways that terrified the galaxy. They were intelligent. They created weapons. They built machines. They evolved, not over generations, but in real time. A human faced with a problem didn't need its species to adapt over millennia. It would adapt immediately. They trained their bodies to endure unimaginable pain. They honed their minds to outthink anything that threatened them. They didn't just survive, they dominated. Reports detailed how they had hunted creatures larger, faster, and stronger than themselves. Not for food. Not for survival. But for sport. They swam with apex predators, climbed mountains so high they could barely breathe, and ran toward natural disasters just to study them. They were the only known species that actively sought out dangerous environments for entertainment. And then there were their wars. The Galactic Council reviewed the records with growing horror. Humans weren't just aggressive, they had waged war against themselves for thousands of years. And not over resources or survival, sometimes for ideas, for power, for the sheer refusal to back down. Their history was drenched in blood, yet they always emerged stronger. They turned conflict into progress. They studied war like an art. Weapons of mass destruction, precision-guided missiles, biological warfare. Humans had engineered extinction-level threats, and then chose not to use them. That terrified the Council more than anything. A species that could destroy entire civilizations but chose restraint? That was the kind of power no one wanted to test. Containment protocols were enacted immediately. Direct contact was forbidden. Trade routes near Earth were shut down. Entire systems bordering the Sol region were evacuated, their inhabitants relocated light years away to avoid any possible contamination. The decision was unanimous. Earth must never be allowed to leave its system. The barrier was set. The galaxy would watch. And they would pray that the humans never figured out how to escape their death world. They were wrong. They were supposed to be contained. The entire galactic network had agreed. Earth would remain an isolated anomaly, a terrifying world locked away in the depths of an unremarkable solar system. The humans would never develop the technology to leave. Their war-torn, self-destructive nature ensured that. Until they didn't. The first distress signal came from a remote monitoring station. A garbled transmission, frantic voices, then silence. By the time an investigation was launched, it was already too late. The humans had broken the barrier. No species had ever developed faster than light travel unaided. Every civilization that had achieved it had done so only after careful guidance, decades of controlled technological evolution. The humans, however, had been left to struggle alone, quarantined from the stars. And yet they had solved the impossible. Not only had they built an FTL drive, but they had done it recklessly. No careful prototyping, no small-scale testing. They had thrown themselves into the unknown, knowing full well that their first attempts could kill them all. But that was their nature. Risk wasn't a deterrent, it was a challenge. The ship was called Dauntless. Fitting. It was primitive by galactic standards, unrefined, inefficient, but it worked. The moment it breached into hyperspace, Every containment alarm in the galaxy sounded at once. The humans were loose. Panic spread faster than the news itself. Entire sectors went on high alert. Diplomatic channels were flooded with messages. Who had failed to keep them contained? Who had underestimated them? Some called for immediate surrender, offering worlds in exchange for mercy. Others wanted to strike first, to eliminate the threat before it was too late. The decision was made. A containment fleet was dispatched, armed with the most advanced weaponry available. Their orders were clear: stop the humans at any cost. If the Dauntless reached another system, it would be proof that the barrier had failed, that Earth's monsters were no longer confined. The fleet intercepted them at the edge of a neutral zone. The battle should have been one-sided. The humans were inexperienced, outnumbered, and technologically inferior. Victory was a foregone conclusion. It wasn't. The Dauntless didn't just survive. It won. The humans adapted mid-battle, outmaneuvered their attackers, exploited weaknesses the fleet hadn't even realized they had. And when the dust settled, when the last human transmission came through, it wasn't a declaration of war. It was a message. To whoever is listening, we are not your enemy. But if you make us one, we will be your last. The galaxy braced for war. The defeat of the containment fleet sent shockwaves through every major civilization. This was no longer speculation, no longer a distant fear whispered in secure chambers. The humans had proven they were exactly what the Council feared: unpredictable, relentless, and far more dangerous than their primitive technology suggested. They should have retaliated. They should have struck back, launched a counterattack, shown the galaxy why they had been feared for so long. But they didn't. Instead, the humans sent diplomats. It was an act that baffled every strategist, every war council, every species that had prepared for total annihilation. Humanity, the apex predators of a Class 15 Deathworld, had every reason to exact revenge for the unprovoked attack. Yet, instead of returning fire, they extended an offer: communication, cooperation, peace. No one believed them. To most of the galaxy, the gesture was a trap. No predator reaches out to its prey unless it's setting up the kill. Some species argued that humans were playing a longer game, positioning themselves for total domination. Others insisted that this was an act of arrogance, a way to prove that they could afford mercy. The first diplomatic encounter was met with overwhelming paranoia. The delegation arrived unarmed, their body language calm, their words measured. But beneath the surface, every movement, every response, every choice they made exuded the same terrifying fact. They were not afraid. They had been attacked. They had survived. And now they were offering peace, not because they needed it, but because they chose it. The implications were devastating. A species that could have crushed entire fleets yet showed restraint was not a species to be trifled with. There was no leverage against them, no fear to exploit. If diplomacy failed, the galaxy knew there would be no second chance. The humans weren't seeking allies for protection. They were giving the galaxy a choice: coexist or be conquered. The choice was clear, but the galaxy hesitated. Fear had governed them for too long, and now it left them paralyzed. If they accepted the humans' offer, it meant acknowledging their own failure, admitting that everything they believed about power and survival had been shattered by a species they had tried to suppress. Some factions refused to take the risk. They vanished into deep space, abandoning their worlds, unwilling to exist alongside something they had spent centuries fearing. Others plotted in secret, convinced that if they struck at the right moment, they could still erase the threat before it fully spread. But the rest understood the truth. The war had already been lost, not in battle, but in the sheer force of what humanity represented. They weren't here to conquer. They didn't need to. They had already won. The first alliances were hesitant, reluctant. Trade agreements were drawn, technology exchanged. Some still waited for the betrayal, convinced the humans would drop their pretense and reveal their true nature. But time passed, and humanity did what it always did. It adapted. It learned the intricacies of alien politics, navigated complex treaties, found strength in diplomacy just as it had in war. What they didn't take by force, they took with influence. They absorbed cultures, ideas, innovations, and improved them. The galaxy didn't fall to human aggression. It submitted to human inevitability. They had been classified as a Class 15 Deathworld, the highest, most dangerous rating in history. And they had lived up to it, not as mindless destroyers, but as something far worse. A species that could not be stopped. A force that would shape the future. They had given the galaxy a choice. And the galaxy had chosen survival.